with ascendant Capricorn approaching Venus in Capricorn, which is not doing very much. But Saturn is direct in Pisces, and the moon is in Gemini, middle phase of Gemini, remediating the opposition between Lilith and Chiron. And this is a Sol day and lunar hour, so called to Apollo for abolishing tyranny, which is and both creativity, abolishing tyranny. So let's give reverence to Apollo. And the sun is opposing Uranus. There's just so much to talk about. And I'll begin with a personal experience. So yesterday, as I was recording video, I ran into a certain energy, and that energy was very loving. It was so loving, just like a warm hug. And I managed to sleep very well. And as a person who undergoes beating, sexual assaults in the astral, and like all kind of dumbfuckery, that was quite an experience. And today I was kind of nudged to look that person up in Instagram, and they blocked me. Apparently because I'm not even American, apparently because I don't vote blue, or because I say that both the red and the blue and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Trump are very likely MK Ultra project, and we need to tend to ritual abuse. So apparently that landed me a block. But the juxtaposition of kind of like the warm hug and waking up to being blocked by the very energy that I received the warm hug from is both confusing, um, and there's something very like remedifying or interesting about that. I know that people that are associated with cults or MK Ultra, they have to block people, or they have to. I had a very good friend that had to block me when I mentioned that, and the way that it was done by her, it was very horrid, because she made it like she doesn't understand what I'm talking about, and then says it's danger to her, so she has to block me, which is a really huge betrayal. Like, you could tell me, well, I can't be like that's life endangering for me to mentioning these things, and just go off, and I would get that. Like, you don't have to do gaslighting and stuff like that. And here there was this kind of like a big hug, but then on the action there was a block in action, which was kind of like, well, very like, I don't know how to interpret that, but one way to interpret that would be, hey, I won't be able to talk about MK Ultra, but it's not. I'm not a hater. So um, so that's something that I found very strange that I woke up with. Um, and this brings me to another point, because a lot of us have been worried about, AI and transhumanism, and how all decisions are going to be basically made by something that's not human, and that's a part of the 2030 agenda. Um, and of course, any famed people sometimes need to take 1,000 steps back. Even Jago Wright, okay, she said when I mentioned MK Ultra, it's probably me. I didn't see, but maybe it was others, but I didn't see anybody mentioning that other than me. And when I mentioned that and she addressed it, then the veterans from the Cold War began to speak. And she was like, "Hey, why do you talk about MK Ultra if you can't do anything?" But then she went on to say, "Hey, it's everywhere." And big reverence to Jag for that. It's not easy to break the silence. And then when the veterans from the Cold War begin to speak, we begin to have, and even today, so I woke up to like this blockade from the last energy that I would expect to block me, simply because they're very high rank. Okay, they're not. I wouldn't matter. Like, I wouldn't think I matter in that level. Um, so um, so the thing is that when it comes to this MK Ultra, let's go back to domestic abuse, because that's makes it easier to understand. There's a lot of silence in around domestic abuse, or any type of abuse, or child abuse, and the secrecy is a part of the plan. Okay, Then if that's related to a cult, there's a lot of secrecy. And when it's government, then of course there's a lot of secrecy. I remember when I was using OkCupid to speak just with people, some person that I thought was Slavic apparently was from Syria, and I asked him, about like, hey, you live under a tyranny, and just like the joke, there was a joke between Israeli people and Syrian people, that Israeli said, the Syrian said, hey, you don't have cars, you don't have luxury things, you don't have this, you don't have that. But the Israeli said, you don't have democracy, you don't have this, you don't have that. Um, and so the conversation went about, in a way of like, how can you live under a tyrannical regime? And he said, well, I am Christian. And he was, yes, he was a Catholic Christian. And he said, for Syria before the war, nobody asked me what my religion is. Okay, nobody asked me what my religion is. After the war, I cannot go anywhere without people asking me what my religion is, which is very strange. So this tyrannical person was defending the minorities, and what happened is that, yeah, I do not talk about the regime on the phone. I do not this. I do not that, and that's it. Okay, and I guess that's very likely what the way that it's been with MK Ultra. It's like, hey, you don't talk about that, but you're assigned to support a certain campaign, and that campaign entails people who undergo and perpetuate ritual abuse, depriving people of housing, um, human trade under the guise of medical care. I know this from psychiatry because I was given an entire degree, a funding for a degree, and nobody talked to me about it, but there was a hope that would be this public speaker that tells you to take your pills. And if those pills were helpful, I would do that, but they don't, not only they are not, um, and maybe to some people they have some sort of a cocktail that works for them, and that's not to annihilate treatment for them, but we can't be doing pyramidal and extra pyramidal, um, and have people not being able to poop, not being able to have a functioning heart or brain, and a celebrity having a concoction that maybe is sugar pills, like for all we know, publishing that, and supposedly raising awareness to mental health without addressing the medical welfare that was done against people, to deprive them of their housing, to tag them when they escape domestic violence, to tag them as psychiatric, to take their resources and money, to not allow them to make income. Whereas those that were abusive to them were government agents, intelligence agents, perhaps cold people that were associated with that. Um, and so, but the only way to heal is to have your housing and your ability to travel in connection with nature and to be believed when you speak about that. So there is this leaning out of certain frames that's challenging, and people get a blockade and they're afraid to tackle that. Um, and there are a lot of ultimatums placed in front of people when it comes to that assistance being deprived. And I know that because I see that on myself. Okay, the minute I said no to abuse, and the minute they saw that I'm not going to be this influencer that tells you to take your olanzapine, but I actually exposed that, I got deprived of assistance with housing, with food. Anything was set against me. Um, Basically deprived to be at a place where the human trade is, and that dumb fuckery. So I guess when I tackle people like Pedar the Freeze, and a lot of people were hurt by him. Okay, and I say downright what the situation is and what needs to change, so that get both the people that were for him triggered because I mentioned things that you're not supposed to talk about, and the people that were hurt triggered because I don't make him a monster. Um, it's like there's a human being there, and they get a lot of people, they get a lot on a lot of people on their nerves, but it get a lot of people a situation where, I'm kind of like the Aries figure right now. Um, but um, but I want to continue on and talk about something, another topic where that relates to, because the answer to if we don't vote, then they ruin democracy is tending to MK Ultra, is tending to ritual abuse, because when they're going to replace the leaders, both left and right, okay, the leaders that you're made to hate and the leaders that you're made to love, um, black people voting Trump because they don't like to be dependent on financial system that deprives them of ability to make an income. Me as a person who's reliant on welfare still, because I was deprived of ability to make an income by the workforce, that's MK Ultra infused, and now we see more of that symbolism. Okay, and at the same time, people that do need gender affirming care because they were maybe cloned, maybe born, maybe through the DNA, on purpose even to need that type of care, but they're not being told of what the implications are, and they're not being offered medical care. And Elon Musk has a daughter that deals with that, and he tries to go to where he knows, so he tries to think about the gender thing, and that of course made Twitter X. um, and when we don't deal with MK Ultra and ritual abuse, uh, we don't deal with what's underlying all the systems, including the medical systems, and then we deprive people of the gender care that they do need, or we allow people to love their body and their non-conforming gender at the same time, and except for the feminine and the masculine, as valid bodies and valid genders, uh, which without we cannot cure gender dysphoria, regardless of if we change the body, by the way. Um, and that, and of course, not depriving people of gender affirming care, but also not gaslighting them about what it actually is, and that's important. And that works on canceling the sexual polarity, which has been a part of what the Hermaphrodite cult, the Rosicrucian, the hidden orders have been doing. Um, And so when we think about transhumanism, and the idea of being replaced with basically AI robots that have some sort of conscience, we understand that to understand the robot, or the transhuman, the Homo roboticus that is scheduled to take over, we need to understand the programming of people and the Ubermensch project. And so if you say, well, what happens, and when it first happened in Israel, I was like, people were like, I'm not going to vote, and I came from not an overly political house, but I just didn't see, like, okay, if we have a democracy, we need to have another party, we need to have another option, okay, but how come not vote? That affects, like, that's your voice, you don't want to take your voice away, and indeed that is used to allow people to allow a situation where your voice is taken away and you're not voting, okay? But what we need to tend to is not enough to not vote. We need to tend to ritual abuse. We need to tend to programming of people, we need to do that inclusively. Just say, okay, there's two genders, go to the kitchen, is another thing that works in favor of creating this chaos that never worked for humanity. Um, and that requires a certain level of intricacy that we are, that's ushering us to the golden ages, because that intricacy basically means we are inclusive towards people, and then the technology works in our favor. Like, this cell phone is used to raise awareness, but hey, wouldn't it be nice if that cell phone was produced ethically? Okay. um, I can drink almond milk, but more importantly is that I do not set billions of cows to be killed because they're no longer needed for the food trade. But whether they are freedom farms, or they are, ways to produce these products ethically, and it's both bringing knowledge from ancient societies and indigenous societies and incorporating that. Um, I recently read about the grass and the fact that a lot of grass in the city is basically engineered, and so people become allergic to it. Where to beat that allergy, we need to have access to nature, and yet nobody wants to get killed by a bear in the winter. That we do need to come to genuine um, engineering of a society that is both natural and comfortable to live with and advanced. And that's a genuine challenge that we are facing as humanity. So, yeah, the discussion about programming of people and cloning of people without annihilating people. Okay, the discussion about the fact that I'm half Dutch, our parliament is cloned people, um, and our maybe favorite TV shows and true crime cases just either cloned people or very close to cloned people. Okay, um, it can be done without monsterizing them. Um, and without that being taken into a one world religion agenda, okay, um, and without complying with the agenda that basically enslaves also our leaders. When I saw, on Mark Rutte's channel, I think it was the possibility that an AI will take over the decisions of Mark Rutte. So perhaps that would enable him to work less, but is not a person who's afraid of hard work. Um, but that would definitely make him expandable. And another thing that I came up with was the fact that for these people, the home inside them was broken, and they could only survive by doing that to others. Um, so you can't expect your leaders to take care of the housing crisis. Uh, we have to change the Masons. Um, and you can't expect your favorite influencers to support you on that on a visible level, okay, because that endangers. Okay, and just seeing how Jag Wright jumped when we talked about MK Ultra, and then she took the courage because it's Jag. It shows you, because that is something that people felt helpless around, that they could never change that. And now it's scheduled to be changed. Um, and so, I saw, lawyers in Netherlands sharing their replaced at birth cases, and at the same time having to defend like offenders against children, but not being able to explain that perhaps some of these children are children they're kind of like they're meeting, and those children are MK Ultra children that are programmed to um, be sexpionages, and there's an entire intricacy system around it that need to be tackled, because people are getting mind control. Because if you were a child that was mind controlled and you grow, then you grow to be mind controlled, and those are also children doing that. Um, and that's something that you can't talk about without uh, 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 being seen as very literally a monster. Um, Whereas if we are to tend to pedophilia, we are to tend to that. And I think Anneke Lucas, for her testimony, she's just sharing her story because she needs to recover an understanding that no, we can't go on raping children, and to tend to that, we need to tend to abolishing the praxis of ritual abuse, and we can't rely on our politicians to do that, because they are the one governed on keeping that, or they're going to be extremely tortured again. And I am going through satanic ritual abuse, and I know what it's like to be tending to that. not like our leaders that grew up into that. Um, so fortunately, I'm not like pedo. Um, but this fortune is because I was exposed and was given love that is nourishing, and I had access to that. Um, where other people are completely having their sexual energy mind controlled, and they're turning into downright robots. And then you see with channels of Mark Rutte, it's like, hey, what if a robot replaced Mark Rutte? And you know what is head of NATO? NATO is the biggest military organization. It includes Africa, not just Europe. It's an American organization in Europe. This is why Mark Rutte speaks English, okay? Um, it and it refused. Okay, they're gonna have to work with the BRICS, so they're gonna have to work with Asia. Um, so having AI taking these decisions, you say, okay, but okay, according to what programming? The same programming that you dislike about your leaders, which is MK Ultra. So that's just not going to be a human doing that. Um, and while there's absolutely nothing wrong with technology or with decision making, if we don't tend to satanic ritual abuse, if we don't tend to ritual abuse, to the replaced word, to cloning, to all these things that were conspiracy theory and were sci-fi films to us, but exist, then you're gonna have an AI machine making decisions about the world war and enslaving humanity, and that's it. On the other hand, when we do tend to that, because just as this morning I said, okay, well, the very energy that is still supporting me, by the way, as I speak right now, in energy, um, but had to block me on social media. Um, okay. Um, and I wake up and I see another post about Jeffrey Epstein, that had basically a place where it's kind of like a hotel or a place where they would fly in girls, and these girls, not only that they were abused and tortured, but they were on the human trade and sex slavery. And then sex slavery, it's to torture these people. You use the sexual energy so they would be dissociated. You use electric shock as well, and then they're turned into espionage and they're mind controlled. Okay. And as a person that has been tending to being in my body for 4 decades, and I was born from a parent. Okay, I was born from not like bodily birth. Okay, it's not cloning. Um, and this is something that I know for sure, that I don't question. um, then even if even I was tending to that and was dealing with that, then imagine the people that were cloned, right? And so the secrecy is something that you have to fight to expose abuse, and they would take it on exactly the people that escaped abuse, that they have to. It's like a threshold. It's like to go on, speaking about this. You'd have to remove the block, and that's facilitated more and more, to take down these walls that keep people from breaking free from abuse, even if it's government abuse. And the fact that to not vote is not about, yeah, we are not going to vote and then some AI will take over, but it's like, hey, we're not going to vote until we abolish ritual abuse, we tend to these children, um, and we come up with an inclusive society where AI serves a goal of, we're integrating with AI, rather than being taken over by AI. But for that, we have to tend to power issues within our very human society. and within nature. So let's talk about astrology a little bit. So Sun opposing Uranus, okay? This is removal of tyrannies, but it's also rebelling the father and father figure. Uh, um, it's a conversation between the influencer, because Sun is leaders, okay, and influencers, the leader, the influencer, and the rebel. Um, uh, Rebellious notion, unusual notions of femininity, versus deeply scorpionic leaders, influencers, investigators, intelligence, even. I think about Joe Biden. I think was Scorpio, and he had a stellium in Scorpio, and he was MK Ultra. He was in the committees of MK Ultra, so it seems like a very sensitive, loving father. But if you look at how he held children, you see that there were problems there in the arena, even if it's about like, even if you don't go all the way to pedophilia. And he was in the committees of MK Ultra. Okay, so, and that's the father that people that escaped abuse were supposed to be reliant on, now to be replaced by Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris, and eventually, or for people that thought that their capitalism, or that their sovereignty over their finances and ability to make money will be supported by the red pill, okay, which is not. Um, but then destroying the exposing democracy and saying, well, not vote, or vote here or vote there. It doesn't matter whether you vote or not vote. We still need to tend to the issue at hand, because the issue at hand is the issue at hand, and transhumanism was facilitated by cloning people and by torturing people. And so the question is not if we're going to have a new species of people, but what would be the nature of that species. And just like, I'm half Dutch, everybody that's celebrity that says cloned, okay, the fact that people are cloned or mixed with reptiles or whatnot, that's less the point. The point is the upbringing. The point is, are they, you can grow a canine and you can grow it to be vicious, or you can grow you can grow a golden retriever, and if went through abuse. And I was babysitting a golden retriever that went through abandonment fears, because they are they're dogs that need to get out and to exercise. And if they don't have that, yes, they begin to ruin your house. Okay, and they're pretty strong. Or they can be nanny dogs, but to be nanny dogs, you got to grow them like children, so then they take care of children. Same thing with your hermaphrodite. Okay, if you name anybody, and Hitler is a good example. Because if you think, hey, Hitler was a clone and he went through satanic ritual abuse, so he was very likely raped and tortured and had to rape and torture, and he couldn't be an officer, as was this artistic child. And so that person becomes sadistic. That person becomes deprived of love. People become sadistic. If you have one person in your family that is supportive of your love and nourishment and provide you with hugs, then you don't become sadistic. It's very simple. It's a function of having nourishment available to you, and at the same time, if you don't have somebody providing you with that, yes, you can, your confidence, your validation and approval, then you find it challenging to provide it for yourself, and then you're missing, let's say, a solar figure, and it's nothing to do with father or mother. Okay, My mother been a very solar figure in my life, always provided me with confidence and in my competence and so on. Sometimes having harsh arguments, but that's that's just life. Um, but to have that, okay, it means you're not becoming sadistic, and you're also not becoming incompetent in achieving your goals, or and those solar lunar balance. This is important. Okay, if you think about Lilith opposing Chiron right now, so Chiron in Aries is our identity, and Lilith is our equity, whether it's a sexual identity or the rebellious wife. Okay, she's the wife that won't be subjugated. There's an opposition right now, okay, between the Chiron that is curating in Aries and the Lilith in Libra that won't be subjugated. Okay, and Chiron is retrograde. So we've been through that. We've gone through that. Um, and that manifests in various ways. Lilith is the jurisdiction process. Just today I had a conversation with Roni Sadov-Nicoloni. She's a very famous feminist lawyer. And she talked about another case where the judges, basically a woman was dealing with domestic violence and she was threatened by the family. The woman couldn't tell the judge that she's being threatened as she persecutes, because the judge had to rule themselves out for some godforsaken reason. And I tell Ronnie outright, if we don't tend to what judges need to do to children in order to remain in their job, that is also an intelligence job, and I know that from the case of Joris Deming, okay? And I do believe Hansa Madma, okay? And I do believe Hussein Baby Sin. And it's my right to believe, right? And so if we don't tend to the fact that the judges need to do that, then how do you expect there to be support in the case? Okay, we really have, like, we can't avoid tending to that. And that's a conversation I had, okay, with a very feminist lawyer, very successful lawyer. She's been tending to a case of a friend that later had to block me because I talked about MK Ultra and the Mason. And very likely these families that have been somewhat, okay, supportive of certain type of changes, and you have to understand within the Masons themselves, okay, you got people, whether they're doing fertility talismans as women, or like the Masons are changing, and very well so, or black people that talked about, hey, there's a reason why Masons opened separate lodges for black people, and you kind of like, you had to be a Masons because that pertains to all businesses and pertains to the building blocks of our society, whether it's real estate, architecture, societal, social engineering, political system, influencers and artists, and so on and so forth. And so you have to be supported by energy as you begin to speak about these things, because and usher in the golden ages. Otherwise you're just going to get sick, and the medical care will be torture, just like happened with cancer. So but at the same time that people like me are targeted, I get support from unexpected places, and even people that did, block or something like that, or they would come up in energy and they're supportive. Um, so just like during the Me Too era, where I had hidden support and I couldn't even say who the people are, so not to endanger them, that is same right now. Okay, it's like, hey, somebody's tending to that, and if you're tending to that, yeah, you like, of course you're targeted, but you're gonna be supported as well. And I want to mention that you're gonna be supported as well. You're not gonna only be targeted. Um, you're not going to be facing that alone necessarily. Um, and even I, when I have to say something on social media that may be sharp, There's also energy forms like, okay, I get it, but I can't change that because the visible has to maintain a certain attire so that neither of us will be targeted. Okay. And so, and that coming from a person who was like, hey, we need to expose things. So yeah, the way to get, the way to get to a situation where we're not controlled by this giant machine is to tend to the giant machine that's currently controlling people, and to genuinely build structures that are different, whether within our psyche, within our beliefs. I had a conversation today with a woman that talks about the root of our belief and how that affect our experience, and that's very true. But if you were satanically ritually abused since you were infant, and you're not even in your body, then that belief form might be more difficult to locate. Um, we need other ways to go to your body, and maybe that's substance, maybe that's matter, that's Venus, the bare feet on the soil and have that soil not genetically modified, um, or having food not genetically modified, so that if you meant to be, I don't know, vegan or not eat milk or whatnot, that's facilitated to eat actual food. Um, and all of those are being exposed because it's the adjoining of inclusivity. Aries is a lot about inclusivity. That which was not included was recruited to something that destroys humanity. So it's us learning to be inclusive while not giving up ourselves, okay? Going out from people pleasing and learning to be genuinely inclusive, and tending to the various interests that seem to contradict, but actually, in essence, do not. Because let's take the gender issue, okay, gender affirming care. For gender affirming care to actually be ethical, we need to tend to the entire topic of medical welfare, whether in psychiatry or not, and understand the industry there, understand that, that in any case, whichever your gender is, embracing that which is, receptive, or that which is solar, is integral to having a healthy life, even if you do change or operate what's between your legs, okay? um, and the fact that such operations that affect fertility have effect, and you need to be exposed to all the voices to make a decision, and that should be available for you. And when something is completely irreversible, yes, there need to be a good, you need to have access to it, but there also need to be a good sense of judgment gone to that. And can that be done to children? I seriously, at least at the point that we are, I seriously doubt so. Okay? And it's not being anti-LGBTQ, that's being aware of medical welfare and the medical field. And that's true in psychiatry, that's true with cancer, that's true with heart attacks. Okay, if you've been deprived of your tending to your teeth, you may have proneness to heart attacks. Heart attacks in women manifest differently than in men. Um, okay, and definitely if you've had surgeries for like changing your gender, then you need to take into account both the women and the men part, because the hormones are mixed. Okay, so you might not know that if you're a trans woman, then now symptoms for you having heart attacks can be somewhat different as well. Um, so there's a lot that goes into that, and I say that not as we should abolish gender affirming care, but the other way around. We should improve upon a medical system so that we do not deprive or disinclude of those who need that care, but also those who absolutely don't need to change what's between their legs, like me, for example, do not need to be medically wed to procedures where it's like, hey, if you don't agree to go through procedures that could probably kill you, kill your fertility, kill your joy of living, and every day take medication either for diabetes, as your grandmother did, or for gender, then you won't be having identity. You will be sexually assaulted, and it will happen in invisible ways, and you will be chased down and persecuted, and you will be framed as whatnot, and that's a no go either. Okay, that's a no go either. Same as with psychiatry, same as with any medical care. Yeah, not all people recover. Some people would need those pills that are not torturous to recover from cancer. Okay, there's a lot of holistic things about lifestyle and about caregiving and wound remediation when it comes to cancer, but there's also the fact that yes, some people are going to need something, some pill or something like that, and that is not the current solutions, and there are other solutions that bring remission, even if those solutions they're actually caring, but even if not, they withstood the test against sugar placebo as well. So there are things that are not placebo and help take care of cancer that are not chemotherapy. Okay, and so when you say not chemo, it's not necessarily this. I don't remember what is black something that people go to excruciating pain, and yeah, that's a natural treatment for cancer. I'm not going to take that away from you, but there's also treatment to cancer that's not torturous, and we need to talk about that. And that does not frame me as tree hugger, although I would love to hug trees. Nor does it frame me as, traitor in holistic medicine that I talk about that. Um, and that should be tended to as well. There is science is just taking place mostly outside of academic institutions because you get a blockade. Okay, I cannot. If I wanted to say why am I targeted for like MK Ultra when I was born outside of the Masons, I could go to family and roots. I could go to being a peace activist. I could go to writing a thesis about medicine and the question of spirit and matter in in an applied science that downright exposes MK Ultra, especially when you tend to psychiatry and open dialogue and so on. Um, I could tend to all that, and there are endless reasons. Doing astrology outside of the Masons while working with talismans with the core of the core of the core of the core of the new Masons. While telling the group inside of these support groups, yeah, I dedicate this order of your talisman to abolishing satanic ritual abuse and empty. Okay, it's not because I can, but I came to do that, and I can do that, and that's why I'm still alive. And if you watch, every, people who are going to watch my Instagram, they're sometimes going to see like, hey, that person is going through something. um, of course that person is going through something. Okay, it's being both the martial arts of whistleblowers and knowing the sciences and these things. There's a reason why people say life begins at 40, because I have tended to all of that. And I'm being kept alive not to be tortured, but to bring those changes. And those are the reasons that people like us have been staying alive, albeit our own very, like, sometimes I would be angry. Why don't I have access to death? Okay? And this is a challenging process, but also if you want the answer out of the dismantling of the entire structures, there's like, hey, nobody dislikes seeing a crooked government fall or a crooked bank fall, or which we're going to see during, the Pluto Aquarius, um, or a system fall. But hey, it's also not enough, because you're gonna have to take care of those. If you lean into sacrificing the homeless, the disabled, the this, the that, you're gonna run into another Holocaust in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And when I say Holocaust, I don't mean the Jews. I don't mean the Jews. Anybody that was not going to be depopulated, that was exposing that wanted to live a sovereign life under not just Nazi regime, but also the U.S. persecutions, and the blacklisting of people. Anybody that was going that route was framed and was killed, whether in gas chamber or in the witch hunt. People talk about women. I'm sure it was not only women. Or you would be framed as you support the monarchy, okay? Whereas for your reasoning to, let's say, not be annihilating the monarchies, understanding that these are cloned people that had a certain upbringing, and the power was not even at the monarchy. So it's both about decentralizing a certain structure, but both the hidden structure and the visible structure. And that pertains to the question of spirit and matter as well. And so one of the things that I can tell you is that when you embrace and build structures that have containment, okay, you're embraced with that energy. It brings in containment. And it holds space for the inner warrior in you. And so best use of Mars is to build structures that are inclusive and have containment. And that's why Mars exalts in Capricorn, giving reverence to the upcoming series. But leave me something from that Firewall series, that Austin creates by Sphere and Sundry. And Mars exalts in Capricorn. Mars exalts in Capricorn for a reason. It exalts in Capricorn because this is the sign where Mars has durability. So in Scorpio, it's ruthless. In Aries, it's impulsive but very effective. Okay, it defends the self, which is what is, okay, just the ability to defend the self. In Capricorn, it's creating structures. And if you create structures that, and the polarity is Cancer, if you create moon-like structures that nourish and contain and defend them, then you're building up something that has durability and stands the test of time and has a place for both a healthy masculine and a healthy feminine, a healthy moon and healthy sun, healthy structure, and a clear water. Okay, and that's a great use of Mars. I'll definitely be checking this series by Austin. Um, and I know that when I set my mind to it and something's going to happen, I'm going to learn another skill, then the credit's going to open up for me, and then I'll be able to purchase that, or something similar. That's been happening with Sphere and Sundry for a while now. So um, that's the power of. It's very brave for a person to do an exalted Mars in their seventh house talisman. Okay. For those who know astrology, it says seventh house is your partnership, Mars is fights. Okay. So fighting with your partner can happen with that one. But um, but the firewall around exalted Mars is that you are a warrior that stands the test of time. Okay. um, and and the structures that you build are going to stand the test of time. That's why it's so important to integrate the moon, and to go about it in an inclusive way. Okay, because there's the square with Aries here, and Aries is inclusivity, and Aries is going to knock down every structure if it's not inclusive, right? Including the Masons, including the Ubermensch. Okay. Um, and so that is where this curation of those really intense assaults coming from, be able to feel safe in your body, um, and how important that is for our not just survival but us thriving as humanity. Because survival people, if you're just surviving, then sooner or later you're just like, okay, I need to either find a way to thrive or find a way to end it, because it's not a form of living that way. But if you're thriving, then those who are not included are coming up to, hey, what about me, what about me, what about me? And you have to find ways to include of people without being disincluded yourself. I think Aries is also retrograde right now, which would be giving us this gender discussion, like, hey, Aries comes back to the gender discussion and not just hermaphrodite Ubermensch discussion, and kind of connecting the dots, because the topic is inclusivity. Yeah. And then that simply means, okay, if we want to collapse a certain structure, we need to tend to what that structure has been tended. That can be a structure of belief in our mind. Let's say you had a certain belief about yourself, and you want to change that belief because you see it's blocking your wealth or blocking your well-being or blocking love from your life. Then you see, what was that belief serving? Okay, what was it serving? How do I meet that need in another way? Okay, what was that belief serving? How do I meet that need in another way? Same with an actual physical structure. Okay, let's say welfare in my case. Okay, what was the need from that? The more I whistle blow and am accepted into society, the more I'm able to do things and create creative solutions. But I also need to be included into society. So that can be both about gender, about housing, about speaking up against corruption, and those things. And then still not to forget the disabled, the person who is still going through mental crisis, still exposing stuff, the learning, the dedication, allocation of resources to rare cases. For example, how come we have 2030 will not be able to survive the people that are claustrophobic after the war? And after the war, you are claustrophobic. So what are they to do? Be homeless? Okay, right now that's what happened in the United States. And not all of them were rapists. Okay, a lot of them were rapists. Maybe even most of them were rapists, but not all of them were rapists. And at the same time, to recover the system, we need containing structures. Okay, because then the women go out to the street and they're just like raped by this. So what's the point? Okay, this is not, it's not karma. Okay, in that sense. And those people were also the people that talked about MK Ultra and facilitated the healing for women from sexual assaults, because that was what they were healing from. Okay, so all those intricacies, they're getting very heavyweight. Um, and those conversations. The things we've been using to our defense. Okay, think about denuclearification. When there are many children still in caves, and with satanic ritual abuse manifesting the end of all of it. So when it comes to A bomb or H bombs, they would just manifest coverage of entire land in that, which is actually happening. So no one is disincluded from having access to end of suffering, which is ultimate death. Okay, but to remove the nuclear bombs, we need to remove satanic ritual abuse and ritual abuse altogether, also from indigenous society, so there will be no people manifesting that. To remove these walls, we need to remove these practices. So what we've been using to defend ourselves, okay, that can be removed when we are safe from being continuously assaulted, whether in invisible ways or invisible ways, have nervous system infiltrated and stuff like that. Okay. You talk about a firewall of defense, then yeah. If you knock down the walls of somebody's defense, be ready to meet a monster. If someone can defend themselves against you, be ready to meet a monster. Like if somebody has the home inside them broken, and to survive they had to do that to others. Okay? If somebody, if a woman went out of violence, you don't have to go all the way to satanic abuse. A woman went out of violence, and every home tries to rape her and financially abuse her, be ready to meet a monster. Okay? Because she becomes a monster. Unless she finds a place where she's safe. And she's not to blame for the abuse she's gone through. If a person says no to violence and everywhere they go they see violence systematically, then that's how, okay, that's how that's created. And the more that's remediated, the more they finally have like a nourishment that's not there to abuse them, the more they go back from being a monster to being a human being, a loving, tender, respectful, generous, kind human being. But the firewalls will come down when the attacks stop. And Mars in Capricorn stands the test of time. To recover, people need to speak about what they've gone through. To recover the sexual energy and be inside their body. And that's the MK Ultra, and that's the abuse, and that's the ritual abuse, and that's the things that they saw when they were supposedly psychotic. If your psychotic attack had contents, they're like, hey, that's exactly what happened in Ukraine, and then in Israel, and then in Gaza, and then in Maui, then perhaps you are not psychotic. Okay, and to recover, we need to talk about that. We don't have a medical system without talking about that. And it's not for nothing I was doing a thesis about philosophy of medicine in politics and governance department. Like I said, if I have to ask myself, why was I targeted? You know, and I'm Pisces ascendant, which is the funniest. It's like every single step you take, it's another. You step on 10,000 toes of people that thought that they just, let's just shove it to the sides and not deal with that. And what do? You're building up stuff. You're moving wrong. I'm literally moving mountains these days. And I'm building something, and then there are two energies come in and an anti-skill, and I talk about something like rape, and I'm having the antis climbing my head, and I take a rock, and I want to wipe that out of the face of humanity, and meanwhile not paying attention that I'm killing the ant. Or every time they build a structure, an ant falls, and I'm like, oh, that's what happens with this family in real estate. That explains a lot of stuff. And then they excuse that with respect. No, person, woman that's raped from childhood and being tortured and made sex espionage is not disrespectful. She doesn't even have access to her own body. That's what's up. So to murder her won't make any real estate difference. That there's a karma to that wealth, right? To that excuse. Yeah. Okay. But what I do have to say to you, first of all, if a person like me that's been the martial art of whistleblowers on every single facets of the human existence they've been exposed to, and because they were kicked out of literally any place that they tended to because they made a revolution there and people couldn't contain the revolution, so they began to build containing structures in the soil, which now definitely contributes to making the world go around and around and around itself in unusual ways. Then if a person like me received support and assistance, whether in ways to defend myself, whether in nourishment and care, even in energy, and even if I'm supposedly betrayed, there's remediation to that. Okay, and it is not like left alone to deal with it all. Then I want you to know that if you're on that line of being, that there is support, okay? and you're not alone. And maybe the support changes because there's so much that people can contain, where you're not left without containment. And building containing structures in the soil, whether it's the half moons or the rocks or stones or trees, building containment is embracing and inviting it also on an emotional level, building it in the soil, in the roots. So that's inviting it also on an emotional level. And like I said, the old world of covenants, the structure, people had to curse themselves and their families. The incest cults, they sacrificed their own children and cannibalized them, and the children have to grow. The home inside their soul and body is broken, and they break it. And this is how you get to this Robert Caro that covers this Moses guy and the laser investment and all that stuff. And the World Economic Forum. This is how you get there. It's by intense abuse that happens, and we need to tend to that and to change that and to create different structures. Um, and so and that's why, okay, that's why it's not just envy or jealousy, because these people sometimes are very successful, but it's like, hey, they have to sacrifice so and so, they have to this, they have to that, and you kind of like have to survive in that nature. um, and to change that nature is basically to return to another, in another structure we have another nature. It's very simply put. That's the square between Scorpio and Aquarius, because Scorpio is going into the depth of the well. But hey, if the well water is polluted, then the Scorpio is going to know what polluted it, which changes the structures of society to then having well water that's not polluted. Like if you're growing an evergreen forest and you got bay leaf, then your deep well water is not polluted. But if you can throw someone into the well and that's okay, then you're already beginning to create a desert. I say this from a city called Beersheba, which is the seven wells, okay, a Palestinian city that later became under the governing of Israel. It's the city of the seven wells, and it's a desert. That means that those Palestinians must have done something to put too many people in that well, that it became a desert. And so while we are, defending ourselves or building walls, we're also building containment that allows us to then dissolve, okay, for these walls. And this include neither those that are considered weak and neither those that we think are super strong, okay. Mars in Leo, let's embrace that a little bit. There's a nice reception between Mars and the Sun. And Mars in Leo facing Pluto right now in Capricorn, but later in Aquarius, is, the influencer exposing the government. But also the Supreme Court, the Royal Court judge exposing the mole exes that they wanted to make them. Um, and then we go from Scorpio with the sign of transforming, what the change under the vengeance, to an actual architectural sign, that's Aquarius. And this is the architecture of the sciences as well as the architecture of the very buildings. And the cardinal beginning is in Capricorn. The building with the setting, this talisman of society in stone that would stand the test of time for another millennia will be done in Aquarius. And this is why all the cults are exposed, and words that people didn't dare to speak are now coming out as, you know, day by day. And the visionaries, the dreamers, the Pisceans are now both having reality check to the dream, and the reality check is kind of like, hey, you have incarnated that. So I will end with that positive note.